A lot of big names in the NBA just got bounced in the first round of the playoffs this season, so in this video I want to talk about how each first round loss affects these stars' legacies. Let's start with the team and star whose loss wasn't much of a loss. While the famous saying is there's no such thing as a moral victory, if there ever was, this would be it. Paolo Banchero in the Orlando Magic. This team has nothing to be ashamed of, pushing the Cavs to 7 and then losing on the road. And yes, that was a crazy away game. The Magic had a huge 17-point lead, which they did end up blowing, but offensively they got stagnant in that game, and it really did look like it was Banchero against the world. The current legacy of Paolo Banchero right now is that the NBA needs to start putting some respect on his name, and next season the Magic have a lot to show for. Moving on, it's time to discuss one of the bigger losses, Damian Lillard and the Bucks. Of course, the biggest and most immediate response to the Bucks' loss was the fact that Giannis Antetokounmpo missed the entire series due to injury, and even with Giannis on the court, this would have been a battle, albeit one that the Bucks would have been heavily favored in. With all that being said, win, lose, or draw, Dame time? More like shame time. And I know what most people might be thinking, well, what about Damian himself? Wasn't he out in games 4 and 5 due to injury? Yes, he was, but I don't think that fully evades the excuse, especially when you consider the fact that the Bucks won Game 5 without Lillard, and then Lillard's record against the Bucks during this series is technically 1-3, which is a losing record. And before anyone says he was playing hurt in Game 6, if you're healthy enough to play, you're healthy enough to get criticized. It probably would have been better for Lillard's legacy if the Bucks lost Game 5, because then you could say the Bucks lost 3 straight and Lillard wasn't in the final 2 games. And I do understand that I'm probably being a little too hyperbolic in the criticism here. To be fair to Damian, it does take a lot of athleticism and effort to show up to Game 6 with an Achilles issue. But back to the original point of Damian being a Robin instead of a Batman, that was kinda cemented before the season even started when he left Portland. Now in a twisted way, the Bucks going out like this is probably the easier way out. Not that I would want anyone to be injured, the point I'm trying to make is, if the Bucks lost at full health, there would have been no excuses or any type of asterisk on such a loss, and they would face much heavier criticism. At least in this reality, the Bucks have both a scapegoat and a GOAT on their roster. Next up is the 76ers. The current legacy of Joel Embiid still stands in this one fact. Joel Embiid is the only MVP in NBA history to have never made a conference finals so far. His current deepest playoff run is the second round, and this includes every MVP since 1956. With that being said, there are a lot of people who believe that this season Joel Embiid was on path to have a historic season before his injury mid-season. So much so he may have been back-to-back MVP. And on the flip side, there are a lot of people who believe that his first MVP was the result of voter fatigue because the voters didn't want to give Nikola 3 MVPs in a row. As for this 2024 playoffs, one can be very kind to Joel and say that it was an amazing achievement to play all 6 games at 41 minutes per night and drop 33 points per game while banged up and hurt, but even Joel himself went on record saying he can't feel sorry for himself. If someone were to be hypercritical of his play, either you're on the court or you're not, and if you're on the court, then hold no bars, you're getting no excuses. At the time of this recording, Joel Embiid is 30 years old. His window of being in his true prime, even barring any health issues, is likely 3 seasons. That's not to say that when he is 34 he can't play at a high level, but if we're talking peak true prime, these next 3 seasons will define if Joel Embiid is a generational center or if he's the only MVP who can't get past the second round as the main guy. Moving on, let's discuss someone who has proven they can lead their team past the second round, albeit not this season, and that's Bam Adebayo and technically Jimmy Butler, even though Jimmy missed the playoffs. I do think it's fair to factor his legacy into this postseason because in a weird way, him missing the postseason helped the mythos of playoff Jimmy. As even without Jimmy, the Heat were able to steal a game. Just imagine how this series would have played out with him on the court. As for Bam, his legacy as an underrated, hardworking center is still much intact. With underdog teams and players, it's hard to criticize their legacies because it's equally as hard to consider them in any serious GOAT conversation. The praise comes with criticism and vice versa. That's why harsh criticism of GOAT status players, such as say LeBron James, should come more off as a compliment rather than hate. just the fact that they're a part of the discussion is the compliment. To be serious and hypercritical, we won't be seeing Jimmy Butler in GOAT conversations, aside from maybe discussing greatest playoff runs individually, but not all-time careers. Speaking of which, let's discuss said LeBron James and Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron has nothing to prove. LeBron won chips on every franchise he's played for, and thus he ate in LA, and his status as a top 2 player all time was not made nor broken by this postseason. As for Anthony Davis, he already set his legacy as a Robin, and that was set the day he wanted out of Louisiana. And there's nothing wrong with being a Robin, but if Anthony Davis does want Batman status, and if he wants it with success, he would need to find a way to win a Finals MVP, which may not be probable, but technically not impossible either. However, their current legacies before this season started did not change. That's the main point here. And speaking of Louisiana, let's discuss the Pelicans and the lack of Zion Williamson. The legacy of every other Pelican wasn't necessarily tarnished or improved by their loss to the Thunder. There was no mythos for any player on this roster other than the narrative that Zion is an injury-prone liability, which unfortunately was the storyline for the postseason this season. Zion being injury-prone is one thing, but the largest knack on this narrative is the large size of the man himself. Many believe he is susceptible to injuries because he plays at such a heavy weight. Cue the overused Zion is fat meme. Whether this is true or not has no relevance to the fact that this mythos exists, because it does exist. On a positive note, he's only 23 and has plenty of time to get his body right and change said narrative. He already proved that he can lose the weight, and he proved that he has the talent to play at a high level at the NBA level. This ain't over till the fat lady sings. Hopefully that fat lady isn't Zion Williamson. From the thickest NBA player to the Slim Reaper, let's discuss the legacy of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker's trip to Cancun. Devin Booker went on saying this before the postseason started.
Saying it respectfully, I don't know how teams are going to guard us.
Straight cleanup on aisle 3. Come get it.
Yeah, that kinda aged like milk. Before the playoffs started, Devin Booker was commonly known as the best shooting guard in the NBA. As of today, that is a heavily contested statement, especially after losing to rising shooting guard Anthony Edwards. What keeps Devin Booker too much off the hot seat is that Kevin Durant is sitting in said hot seat. Kevin Durant still holds the legacy of a ring chaser who can only win if he joins a super team with an MVP in their prime on said roster. So far, Kevin Durant has played alongside 4 different super teams in his career. The Big 3 Thunder, the Big 4 Warriors, the Big 3 Nets, and now the Big 3 Suns. And yes, he has 2 Finals MVPs, but those 2 Finals MVPs feel more like 30 pieces of silver and not real awards. Kevin Durant is 35 years old. KD Trey 5's window to beat the ring chaser allegations have 1, maybe 2 seasons left before he becomes so old that he will likely be second fiddle and thus cement himself as a ring chaser even if he wins more rings. And that's assuming this is still KD's team. You can make the argument that this is technically Booker's team, but it is hard to argue that Booker is the bigger name than Kevin Durant, and thus Kevin Durant is going to get more of the criticism. And speaking of those former super teams, there are a lot of members on those teams that play for the Clippers, such as James Harden and Russell Westbrook. And then there's also players like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. All 4 of these guys lost in the first round to the Mavericks. And yeah, Kawhi was injured, but that's technically part of his legacy here. Boy oh boy did James Harden wish that Nets Kyrie played like Mavericks Kyrie. Russ and James Harden have a somewhat similar legacy of Kevin Durant. The only difference is that James Harden was traded from the Thunder, and Russ truly gave OKC his all. So they may not be known as ring chasers, but they did lose their Batman status and are now Robins. They are MVPs without rings. Load management Kawhi Leonard faced yet more injury issues, and so his legacy as an injury-prone aging star is showing that he had a short prime, but his overall legacy isn't too damaged, as that was pretty much set in stone the day he won his second Finals MVP and second ring when he won it all in Toronto. As for Paul George, despite balling out, especially in Game 3 when he put up an insane 7 points on 3 for 11 shooting, like Russ and James, Paul George joins the Robin crew, and this series showed us that 3 Robins with an injured Batman cannot beat Luka and Kai. However, to be fair, this postseason didn't necessarily change any of these players' legacies, as this was kind of the current narrative before the series even started. So here was the legacy of each first round loser. Let me know if you agree with these narratives, if you thought I was too harsh or not harsh enough. Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to dunk on that like button and subscribe with notifications turned on. I'm Rebound Rewind, and I'll fast forward to you later.